Great. Well, thanks very much, Malachy, for organising this and for inviting me here.
You're welcome to the north side.
Well, I think it's good to show people that independent candidates are willing to work together, and because our areas touch, it shows that there can be alliances made and progress made, and it's very important because we're obviously here to talk about crime in the inner city. My name is Nick Delahanty. I'm running in Dublin Bay South as an independent. I'm a first time out independent. I was a solicitor for 10 years and now run a small business. The whole reason I'm doing this is because I fundamentally believe that we need better people in politics. And when you go through the list of even the cabinet or ministers, they're all people that are just born into a political dynasty. They might have signed up to Fine Gael Ógra on Freshers' Week at college, and 15 years later they're the Taoiseach, and that happened two times in a row now. So we need actual people with calibre, people with experience, and so that's why I'm throwing my hat in the ring.
Thanks, Nick. I'm Malachy Steenson, councillor in Dublin City Council. I was elected last June. I stood in a number of times in elections before, and I believe passionately in trying to create a better Ireland. I'm a solicitor by profession. I'm also a criminologist, and I've always been interested in crime over the years. And this area, has been at the forefront of crime, I suppose, for decades. But this is a new format that we're doing tonight. It's kind of a public meeting, but it's not a public meeting. It's kind of just a thing to put up on social media. It's kind of like a podcast, I suppose. And myself and Nick will just have a chat. And again, welcome over this side. It's not too many people come over this side from the other parts of your constituency, because Dublin 4 wouldn't really have much connection, most of it with Dublin 3. The Ringsend part obviously does. And it's very similar to this side of the Liffey. It's an old Dockland community as well, and there would be a lot of connections between the two. But tonight we're going to be talking about crime, and we're going to be seeing what solutions we'll offer and what we see are the problems as well. And crime has many facets. It's not just the fella going with a mask into a bank, although that seems to have stopped now because there's no banks to rob. And it goes right through, from white collar crime right through to mugging an old woman walking along the road. And
you're a criminologist. What would you have said the difference in crime levels has been, or the change over the last 5 years?
Well, I think if you go back, if you look at different levels of crime, I think there's a general breakdown of law and order. Yeah. I think that there's no discipline in people, and the amount of young people who are involved in just random crime, leaving aside the kind of gang structure and the amount of random violence in town. If you walk into town, go down Talbot Street tonight, fair chance you might get a box in the head for no particular reason, or you may see somebody getting attacked. And there's just open drug dealing, and there's just general mayhem.
Yeah, I would say the inner city has been left to rot. Like there's a theory, broken window theory. If you have a building with a broken window in it, crime will ferment around that building, and that's what's happened in town. My constituency is very broad, so the inner city part, crime is a big issue. But the minute you go out to the leafy burbs of Rathgar and stuff like that, crime is less of an issue. People don't see it. And I was out canvassing there only a week ago, and there was a very nice lady opened the door, and she said she went to a Cllr concert, and she hadn't been around Croke Park in years. And then it clicked for her. She's like, oh my God. She sees it now and she gets it. But then I talked to other people. Just in the last 6 weeks, 2 people I've canvassed within their estates, cars have been robbed. So the fancier areas with the nicer cars, it's spreading. And there are gangs going around, organised stealing cars. But what I notice in town is the open drug dealing. We all see that. But there just seems to be a lot of people, gangs of men walking around aimlessly, not working, not doing anything. And it's only on certain streets, on probably more than the north inner city. And it's only till when you see that. How new is that?
Well, there's always been a level of that, but just to touch on the broken windows theory, I'm old enough to remember being in the North Star sometime in the late 80s, before Fianna Fáil went back into power, and John O'Donoghue was Fianna Fáil spokesman on justice. And he came to that meeting, and some of you would have been there, telling us how when he became Minister for Justice in the next government, which he did, that he was going to bring in this broken windows theory, and he was going to, I think Timoney was on about, in New York, was on about zero tolerance at the time as well. And these were the buzzwords that was going to be used. Now, of course, he got in as Minister for Justice, and I think Fianna Fáil were in power for about 10 years after that, and the problem just got worse. And at that time, I think, when O'Donoghue was in opposition, they were talking about increasing the numbers of Gardaí to 13,000. They never got to that. And we've increased the population by over 1.5 million. And we have less cops per capita. We have police stations all around the country closed down. And there's no cops on the ground. There's no law and order.
And the interesting thing, Simon Harris put together an inner city task force, and their report came out only a few weeks ago. And the recommendation from that report was 1,000 extra guards on the street. Like 1,000. Yeah, how can you say that seriously? And like, how has that situation been allowed to develop? So it is recognised, but like, how is that possible? How can we get to 1,000 guards?
Well, I think the figure is actually going into the guards are something like 200 a year, and the amount of guards who are retired or who are leaving or who now are being recruited to go to Australia to be cops, where they have a much better lifestyle and they can at least afford to buy a house or rent one even. So the numbers are never going to go up, because in reality, who would want to be a cop today? And when you have, the police service being run effectively by MI5 now through Drew Harris and the Assistant Commissioner, what's her name, from the RUC as well. And the amount of ex-RUC cops that are now here, that's a police force being run by people who've sworn an allegiance to another government.
Yeah.
And taking an oath to them.
It would seem that the morale within the guards is just completely askew at the moment. Like, there was that drama last year of Minister McEntee. She wouldn't go to the ball because Drew Harris wasn't invited. Like, that was a bit of a spat. But it's something that you would think that if there was a competent minister there, would be able to grab that situation by the scruff of the neck and sort it out. Yeah. But she's not able. But, she's now been promoted to deputy leader of Fine Gael, more failing upwards. And,
the lack of ability doesn't seem to be any bar in government to getting a higher job.
It's more longevity, how long you stay around for.
And you'd wonder, anybody rash, and child looking at the government, it seems that the more incompetent you are, the more likely you are to succeed. Like, who would have ever thought that Harris would have been Taoiseach, And you've McEntee, Dublin is safe. And, in the police, 99% of the cops, when they voted last year, have no confidence in the commissioner. In any other country, he'd have been out the door. But, and what he has done to policing here, he's brought in effectively a paramilitary style policing, this heavy-handed approach to protests particularly, or rather to protests that they disagree with.
They've been handed a hospital pass because they're being made enforce these laws and this policy, whether it's the protest up in Newtown, Mount Kennedy, or Cllr, or wherever. If you're a guard, you didn't sign up for this, and you're just like, what am I doing? It's totally unfair on them. And this whole policy, even though every single person is against it, they keep driving it through. Yeah. And, we see in the news now that the site at Thornton Hall isn't going to go ahead. But not only is it not going to go ahead, but will they now reverse it and make it into the prison that it was supposed to be in the first place?
Well, the same people who objected to it being a prison years ago, and remember we paid, I think, twice the value of that site when the government bought it, are the same people who succeeded now in getting this overturned. And, the reason that they have to stop doing it now is because it's on a flight path from Dublin Airport. And on those flight paths, there's noise abatement, and the airport has to provide you with triple glazed windows and all of those things, so you're not listening to the noise of the planes all the time. And that would be too much of an imposition on people in tents. They wouldn't be able to not hear the planes. Now, considering these people are supposed to be coming from places where real bombs are landing, I would have thought a plane going over wouldn't be much.
Yeah.
But again, it's the area, and it's, you can't have a veto apparently on who lives in your area unless you live in Ballsbridge or Ashbourne.
Or in Limerick, as the minister down there, he vetoed that. But the one thing I say to people ask me, who should I vote for in my constituency? And I say to them, a quick way to find out who you want to vote for is ask the party or candidate, are they in favour of building another prison? And very quickly you'll figure out their stance on things. And I'm totally in favour of building more prisons, because as the population rises, the percentage of criminals, is going to stay the same, the number's going to go up. But the pushback for it is that, no, we need a progressive form of a justice system. And there was this guy on RT last Monday up front with Katie Hannon, a hilarious clip where he's literally using New York as an example of when New York in the 90s brought in a zero tolerance policy. And he said, oh, it worked, but not for those reasons. It worked for different reasons. And we're like, no, it worked for a zero tolerance policy. And why can't we bring in that? What is it that is stopping a Fine Gael government, who are supposed to be law and order, from building a new prison?
Well, you see, I mean, and it's, despite what people think, it's very hard to end up in prison in this country. If you look at most people, they're in for petty crimes, but they'd have a string of convictions before that. And they tell us that the prisons are overcrowded, and they tell us, that they should use all these other programs, but they don't work. There are a lot of people who should be in prison. Most of them are in Leinster House. But they can find a cell for Enoch Burke.
Yeah.
But Judge Nolan doesn't seem to be able to find cells for people caught, particularly with child porn. And one of the things that we'll be doing, when we get into Leinster House, is we'll be bringing a motion before the houses to get him out. And, people will come back now when they listen to this and say, oh, you can't do that. He can be got rid of for misconduct. And this clearly, there is a pattern of events here where he seems to be very lenient. And if you're somebody who's caught with child porn, you would want to go in front of Nolan. I mean, and Nolan is an ex-cop. So people can speculate on why he makes these decisions. I'm not going to speculate on them.
But part of the reason is, the prisons have never been more overcrowded. And it's funny to take the side of, the people who are against it. And they say the prisons are so overcrowded that it's not acting as a deterrent. And you're like, that's not what's happening. They're so overcrowded that we can't send more people in. And then it encourages people to commit crimes because they know they're not going to go to prison. And, there's a cohort of people living in the north inner city or south inner city, and maybe only 100 people, but they literally get up every day and they go out committing crimes. Yeah. Now, it's a small number, but they taint the whole place. And so that's why you need prison spaces. And I'm for progressive prisons. There's a difference between a violent criminal and a drug addict. And we can all stand here and say that, and we can all take their side and say, yes, we need to stop crime at the source, in the home, and fix the social issues. That's great too, but you need the prison beds as well.
You see, when people talk about crime and they link it to disadvantage and all of that, that's just a cop-out. Like, this area in the inner city gets tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions a year, across a whole range of different schemes that supposedly solve all these problems. But all we've done is create a middle management of NGOs who, it's not in their interest to actually solve any of the problems. Although when one problem goes, they just move on to the next one, A lot of the people who are, for instance, dealing with homelessness a number of years ago are now just dealing with asylum seekers, So there's always be another gig when the state is funding it. But during the feud here recently, or a number of years ago now at this stage, the Mulvey report came out. And this is Ciarán Mulvey, another go-to guy, you know, who probably got 200 grand for doing the report. And I said, when it was announced exactly who he would talk to, I said what the results would be. And I didn't get anything for it. And the results were, as I said, pile a load of money in, give it to his group, but don't give him anything because we don't like him. And that's what happened, 10 million. And it didn't change a thing. And, you know, you talk about people getting up and going out and committing crime. Drug dealers today work shifts now effectively at different corners, or, you know, they work from 9 to 5, or, you know, whatever. Like, they work a 40-hour week, to be fair to them. You know, they're going out to work. They're not going out in their head to commit crime. It's just that the product they're selling is illegal. So they obviously have to have spotters and that around as well, who are just a lower link on the chain, you know, who get at least the minimum wage. And it's an industry, and it's the biggest industry. And we were at in the council a meeting with the assistant commissioner there a while ago. And she was telling us, we've seized 750 million worth of drugs in the Dublin metropolitan area so far this year. Now, this was sometime in July, I think. And she thought this was great. And everybody was saying, oh, fair play to you. And I said, well, that's terrible. And they're all looking at me, because they don't know what way in the council to take us, because they hate us. I said, you're only getting 10%. That's the international figures on drugs, is you seize 10% of what's out there. So the trade in the Dublin metropolitan area up to July of this year was €1 billion. I said, I don't want to see you seizing anything, because the day you're seizing nothing means there's nothing out there to be seized. And they can't understand that. And this is why they come on and they tell you, oh, we got $1 million here and $1 million there, and we got a load of cash as well, and seized a few cars. And of course, they brought in Cab then after Veronica Gearden was shot, only because she was one of them. And it's gosh, you know, when somebody dies, people often rewrite their history. Like people like Paul Williams, who didn't apparently have any time for her when she was alive, was then her greatest supporter when she was dead. And it's the same, you know, when, what's your man's name? Ryan, the RTE guy. Jerry Ryan. When he died, you know, people in RTE, oh, we didn't know he was on drugs. I knew he was out of his head on coke most of the time. So,
but when it comes to,
you know,
when it comes to
how did they not?
When it comes to cocaine, like there was actually a viral picture that went up after the Punchestown races last summer. I'm not sure if anyone saw it, but it was a group of 20-year-olds all in the toilet, all queuing for the cubicles. Like there was either some bad food going around, or everyone was queuing up to do coke. So like it's so prevalent. I have an 18-year-old nephew, and you can just, I don't know if he's taking it, but there's, you know, you see other 18-year-olds, and that's the thing they're doing. Now, cocaine for me, it would be probably the worst thing you could, like, deal you could ever do, because it's what they're getting this in cocaine, even it's watered down. I don't know what it is, but would you be in favour of a zero tolerance approach focused on the consumer? Is that one of the better ways to get at it, or how do you tackle it?
Well, if you take here, if you look out that window, you know, particularly coming up to the weekend, you'll see cars pulling in. You'll see fellas coming up on scooters and giving them their gear. And they'll go off to their middle-class suburbs, out to Clontarf or whatever, and have a party with their mates. None of them are ever stopped. And this is why they want to decriminalise it and eventually legalise it. It's because they don't want to have a drug conviction so they won't get a visa to America. And that's actually what they come out with. And they want to normalise it because they're all doing it. I mean, one of the things, we have a motion in the council, probably never be reached, saying that the council should ask, that all of the councils should voluntarily have a hair follicle test twice a year. And it'll be rejected or whatever it is,
Yeah,
because I better not say what I was going to say there, somebody will sue me. But that's what we need. The same in the police. Like, there are rumours about the amount of cocaine that's being used by the police. And if you look at, like, Superintendent Murphy, who was in Store Street for years, lived in Clontarf, his house was raided. And there was, like, I think £250,000 worth of drugs found out the back. He only got done for a very small amount. He pleaded guilty. And now there's a huge investigation into him because he was passing on information to a criminal gang for years, decades.
Well, how corrupt do you think things are? How organised are organised crime gangs? You know, how far up do they go?
Well, the organised crime gangs in this country, you could probably do a list of them, and they wouldn't be far behind Ryanair in that. I'm not saying that Ryanair are in any way involved in organised crime, but as a business model.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the Christy Kinahan, he's a very successful businessman. And he built a multi-billion-dollar business. Now his sons came along and destroyed it, but they've done that with leaving aside the product. So, and that's the level that you're at, where you're, importing and distribution. The whole distribution system set up right around this country, huge importation. And that doesn't happen by accident. This is an island. We could stop drugs coming in if we wanted, but we don't want it, because the state comes along then and it pacifies. You see, I mean, in this country, we want to kill you before you're born. When you get old and you're of no use to society, we want to put you down, and we want to keep you now out of your head in the bit in between. So that's the type of society we're creating. And these things don't happen by accident. It's all by design, and it's all being done to control the population. Because if you most young people out there on some substance or other, you can control them.
Yeah.
Because you can turn the tap on and off, and that's...
And moving away from drugs, but towards kind of what I see in my area is just young kids. And they're just left off the latch, and they're allowed run around on packs of scooters in the summertime or whatever. And sometimes I come across them and I'm like, man, that's a soccer team, that's a rugby team or whatever. And you just like, you feel you could do more for them. But, some of the proposals that fly around are that the parents should be held responsible. What do you think of those type of laws?
Well, I think if you start going down the road of, blaming somebody else for somebody else's crimes. Now, it depends, I suppose, what age the kids are. I mean, they should be certainly responsible if your 4-year-old kid is out in the streets at this time of the night. But can you hold the parent responsible for what their 16-year-old does? Yeah. I mean, you're moving into, because considering we don't let them smoke, we don't let them drink, we're going to let them vote apparently, and they can also decide to be a boy or a girl. Yeah.
Well, just speak on that. One of the things I think, the government famously in the budget brought out this idea of 9 million euros phone pouches. And the phone pouches were a silly idea, but the actual, overall writing principle of addiction to phones and phones being a distraction is I think everyone agrees with that. Yeah. Would you support laws that suspend kids from social media or phones, or how would you?
Well, I think when kids go into school, they should have to leave their phones in their lockers, and that's a simple thing to enforce. But I think what people when they heard about the 9 million, they got incensed about it. Yeah. The same as the bike shed. People were incensed about it. They kind of, when you look at the children's hospital, people can't handle them big numbers. Yeah. Because what's the difference between 2 billion and 2.5 billion? None of us will ever know, because we'll never have it. Quantify, not that we'll have 9 million either, but it's easier to think about. And we used to talk in millions, and since the crash now we talk in billions. And
the number one issue that brought that home was the bike shed. And everyone knows the cost of a bike shed, and everyone could quantify in their head that this is just 20x the price of what any normal person would pay. And
well, just on that, the council apparently have built a bike shed at civic offices. Only cost them $4,500
Where's that?
at civic offices.
All right,
in
yeah.
Woodkey. $4,500.
Does it look as good?
Well, I think you can put your bike.
But nobody's using.
I'm not sure if it keeps your bike dry now.
But so far we've been talking about traditional types of crime, drugs, petty, antisocial behaviour and things like that. But there's a huge section of crime, white collar crime.
That's not really crime.
Yeah,
apparently.
but you know what I mean. But
there's nobody hurt.
Yeah, exactly. But there actually are people hurt, and it creates an environment where we'll get away with that. And I think that there needs to be way stricter rules on corruption. The greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world he doesn't exist, and I believe that's true about corruption in Ireland.
Yeah.
We always rank number 7 in the world in lowest corruption figures, and I look at that, I go, that cannot be right, because since we're turning over billions in surplus, like the pigs are at the trough here.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing metros, we're not seeing children's hospitals being built on time. There is incredible levels of corruption, and where it gets interesting is that when you look at the asylum system process. Now, I talk about this a lot, and whatever you think about asylum seekers, park them for a moment, and it's just the system and the billions that are going into it. There are direct links between that system and organised crime. Yeah. And if you're a Kinahan or $1 billion drug dealer, you need to legitimise. And the number one cowboy industry to wash your money through at the moment is the asylum seeker industry, because you buy a building, you get a stamp of approval from O'Gorman, and off you go and wash your money. And that's where it's really important to hold the two in both hands.
And on that, the people who are making the money now out of bypass centres and that are the very same people who we bailed out in 2008 when they crashed the economy.
Yeah.
And we seem to, I wouldn't say we've learned nothing. The people have learned nothing. The political class have certainly learned how to core their tracks a bit better, and they become more sophisticated. And if you look at even the abandoning of planning legislation and saying that's an office block and now you can house 300 people in it, like they make the laws up, and even down to planning down, and I think it's Wicklow, one of the group companies that own some of these asylum centres, have built a load of houses with no planning permission whatsoever. The council have told them to take them down. No, I think that's lunacy. The state should just take the houses. Yeah, I mean,
they're up there now.
And those houses are full of asylum seekers. Yeah, and there's nothing about it. Yeah,
and this really thing that makes me mad about that is the fact that the people that did go bust in the Celtic Tiger are back, and they never went away. It's the people. I'm 34, and it's like I can't get a mortgage, and the people that can get a mortgage my age are paying for an extraordinarily high, expensive mortgage. And it's because of the crash and because of the bailout that is the direct hangover. And the housing crisis is manufactured back then. And to bail out the people that caused this in the first place, and then not only to bail them out, to give them incredibly lucrative contracts to house very controversial asylum centres. It is like compounding scandal after compounding scandal. Yeah. And I just do not know how we are not rioting in the streets, like 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds, Gen Z, millennials, because I keep saying it is time for our generation to vote ourselves the money and the power, and we need to make the decisions.
I think that one of the reasons that people are not on the streets, if you look at the amount of people who are employed by the state, whether it's directly by the state or through NGOs and all of these other things that are funded by the state, that's the real problem. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. This is why we have so much compliance. This is why people will complain, but actually do nothing. So
the NGOs are just, sometimes I describe them as the government is the castle in the middle, and the NGOs are the moat around it. And they're the foot soldiers for the government's policy, and who drives the policy is up for debate, whether it's coming from the government or the NGOs. But it's a revolving door cycle. And so if you're at the head of the the Irish Penal Reform Trust, and you do that gig for 4 years and you're on 150 grand, then your term comes to an end, but you just get shifted around to the National Women's Council or something, and and all of them are funded by the government, and they do nothing.
You have to pretend to be a woman now to get on to the National Women's Council.
But they do nothing. They drive so much policy, and they employ so many people, and the average salary is like 70k, and the top salary is some. And one of the things I say about Harris is that Harris won't fix the immigration problem, because it's his own brother is on the board of the Irish Human Rights Equality Commission, which is a souped up NGO that has a budget of 9 million a year, and that organisation actually sued the government because they weren't granting asylum seekers the right type of housing. So just imagine their Christmas dinner. The two brothers are there, and his organisation's suing him for not providing the right accommodation. So it's not going to get better. They're not going to solve this. And people say, well, how can you solve it? And what I'm consistent in advocating for is a Danish-style approach, which is tough, fair system that focuses on the maintenance of their welfare state. Because we are a welfare state. Ireland is left coded no matter which way you want to put it. We don't have a right wing. You get labelled far right. I sometimes do, but I'm like, you could be less far right. You've been a socialist campaigner for years. But it's the left parties across Europe who have gotten smart on this, and they realise, well, if you want to have a functioning welfare system, you have to control your border.
Yeah.
What do you think?
But that's what we've said all along.
Yeah.
It can only relate to the capacity that we have in the country. If we don't have houses for our own people, well then how can we bring in somebody else? And I mean, if you have a car with 5 seats in it, you can't put 20 people in it. No matter how you try, even if you chop them up and put them in the boot, you still won't get them in. I suppose we should go to questions from the audience now.
Can I go to crime on the street, the broken window effect, and you're dead right, and everything is connected. Because Suzanne and I run the Register to Vote campaign, and the people we're meeting in the streets every day are talking about going through our city centre. And the rate of crime, they said they could all be crime novelists at what they see walking from one end of the street to the other. It's supposed to be just unbelievable. The city is scruffy. I think there should be more pressure Malachy put on the councils to get people back to work, because our city actually resembles a post-apocalyptic city at the minute. There's nobody sweeping, there's nobody clearing the drains, there's nobody picking up the rubbish, there are no Gardaí on the street, so it's like a free-for-all for everyone. You just talked about all that, but that's the frustration that's coming from the ordinary people.
Would you normally go into town for a meal or anything like that, or have you?
I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I've been in court, as you know, with the pool of people over the last few weeks. Myself and Suzanne walked through it, and actually one day I had to pull Suzanne away from the lady she was going to approach because she was defecating on the corner of Jervis Street, and she nearly died. This is midday. This is Dublin now. This is our city. I've been a taxpayer all my life. I'm not getting any just rewards now, and that's why we're advocating for the likes of you guys to get into government, because we need bloody change.
No, well said. Yeah. And when a politician comes to your door, or do you bring this up? Have you gotten any canvassers yet?
I had a Sinn Féin fellow walk in, and I tell you, he was ran for his life.
Yeah.
I swear to God. No, I wouldn't entertain any of them. There's nobody any good, and we're fighting in the background so hard for you guys. We're out on the streets every day telling people to vote nationalists and independents.
Yeah. No, thank you very much.
I was entertaining the other night, like a few of them have approached my door, and I literally won't even waste my energy asking them about their bullshit policies.
Yeah.
So a poster went up on X the other day: if you're part of the main parties, do not knock on this door. If you're voting for independence or nationalists, then knock on my door. So it's a waste of time. What's the point?
Yeah. No, they're going around in circles, but I just hope the general electorate see this. I posted something the other day. There's a difference between this election will be a vote between those people that are consuming social media and those that aren't. Because you live in a different world, and the best world to live in is consuming both. You got to understand. But some people just read that broadsheet every day.
But they are saying that the Trump campaign is one. I just saw something, and again, I'm just throwing out what I took, that a lot of younger people are basing their news facts now on online stuff.
Yeah.
The newspapers.
I think most young people
are.
are.
Translate, and hopefully on X, people are watching the likes of you and Malachy and doing great stuff, and just keep spreading the word.
But it's funny. The best way to talk to someone or to interview someone is a long form podcast.
Yeah.
Like people will say to you, "Oh, you're sitting down with that make crime illegal idiot," or they'll say to me, "You're sitting down with
that far right fascist fella."
Yeah. But here we are. We can have a chat. There's going to be issues we don't agree with, but it's about having that conversation and realizing that it's good to disagree. Like if I say to people, if you agree with everything I said, that would be weird. It's good to have that debate. But at the moment, all the parties seem just so tribal. If you're in the Soc Dems, you do not talk to Fianna Fáil or whatever.
But you see, they don't want, and none of the mainstream media will give either myself or anybody on the nationalist side a platform, because they know what we're saying is sense. They know that we will influence people, and that takes the narrative away from them. Look at the state of them today because Trump won, and they were convincing themselves all week that he wasn't going to win, there has to be something done about opinion polls. Because I've said for a long time, opinion polls are designed to influence, not to reflect. And if you look at the opinion polls in relation to Trump, they were wrong. They were wrong the last time he won. They were wrong in relation to the referendums here. Yeah. They were wrong in relation to the last election here. They're wrong, I think, I can't believe that people are going to vote for Fianna Fáil, for the same crowd back in. Yeah. I just can't, although...
It's just habit, but I've never met someone that has... that'll come.
That's what's happening. They're buying the votes. They're bringing people in to vote for them.
Yeah.
Busting them in.
And that was definitely a thing for the locals, but probably less of a thing for this one. But the longer you stay here, the more national. I get you.
The citizenship numbers.
Yeah, going up. Yeah.
They can all. Once you're a citizen, you can vote in the general election. You just have to be a resident for the locals. So, and those people, and some of them, I mean, you'd be surprised because, like, we have, despite that fact that we're supposed to be racist and all of this, like, we have people of all nationalities who will vote for us, who have come to this country like maybe 10, 15 years ago and have citizenship now and are sick of the way the country's after turned out. And, like, we have people on our campaign team from all different countries, like, I'm not going to say where because that might identify them.
They've done it the hard way, Malachy.
Yeah.
It's very hard the way they actually did it, so they've been through the hard way, whereas...
And they see somebody coming in and getting it for nothing. And that's...
While they're here, they're working and paying their taxes, and that's what they want. But they have made that decision when they came here. Well, this is what I need to do. There's no free handouts, like, so I mean...
Just to throw it, lads, I constantly hear this, we need a new prison. I don't think the prison is a solution, but it's actually getting attention to actually the problem. Very important criminals.
Yeah.
So why don't we actually address the problem in that direction instead of actually releasing them on work, release people that are building on their own properties? There's so many people that actually should be in there, but yet we're locking up those, so you balance are out. Is a new prison that's actually required?
Yeah, well, I would say that the prison, if you actually look at the number of prison beds over the last 20 years, has actually gone down. It stayed flat because of new progressive measures to keep people at home or release people on bail and things like that. But if the population is growing, now we can talk about immigration in terms of people coming here for welfare, asylum, and then people coming here to work. And there's immigration is an umbrella term, but if the population is going to rise as a whole, which seems kind of inevitable at some rate, it's just the rate of population growth. You're going to need more everything, more schools, more hospitals, and more prisons.
That's inevitable. The whole infrastructure needs to change. That.
Yeah.
But there needs to be drawing a line as we're constantly going on about closing the borders.
Yeah.
And needs to be some control and say, look, to what extent do we need a prison? To what extent do we have to say, look, we're not bringing in 500 more people here, there's going to be 500 more crimes. So surely to God, enough's enough.
Yeah.
You need to deport you rather than actually bring the prison people.
Well, if you look at what they announced the other day in relation to housing, that one of these, another Quango, said we need to build 80,000 houses a year, but we need to bring in 40,000 people to build them. So, how are you ever going to solve a problem of housing, particularly, or any of the other issues? And you know, we have all these people saying, "Oh, look at all these people coming to work in the health system. We need them." Well, we need them because we've increased the population,
Exactly. Yeah.
and we need them because our own nurses and doctors
Yeah. It's a self-fulfilling.
have to leave because they can't afford to rent somewhere. You know, we have to get control over what's happening in this country, and we have to stop. We do need to close the borders, at least until we have the housing and the health and the schools and everything else sorted. But, you know, it's like, just to give a small example, in East Wall, they're talking about a traffic plan in the council. For 5 years, I could send one of my grandchildren down with a pen and a paper, and he could come up with a traffic plan. You know, yet 5 years later, so if we can't do something simple like that, look at the metro to the airport. Over, I think, 150 million we've spent on it, and on consultants, and not a shovel in the ground.
That's the point exactly, and get that, because the more times we do something, it's actually just, well, we need more people for that.
Yeah.
Well, we need more houses then. Well, we need more. We can't keep going down the route of needing more. There has to be a stopping point and saying, right, our cap has to be at 5.5 million for now. Freeze at the 5.5 million and then stabilise the economy that way, rather than this constant growth of overpopulation.
Yeah.
It's this continuation all the time. And
You see, societies, your population's normally increased by kids being born who don't need a house straight away. They don't need a house till, in some cases now, till they're 50, they're still at home. But, you know, they normally wouldn't need a house till they're 20. That's and
growth, yeah.
We've done away with that, partly because we killed over 40,000 kids before they were born since we legalised abortion. And the birth rate is going down. So we're importing people who need somewhere to live, need a job, rather than doing it the normal way, like they're doing in some European countries now. They're saying, look, we're going to incentivise people to have kids. We're going to, you know, provide the facilities and grow the population that way and shut the borders.
I would say to both of you, I know you're going to both get in, and I'm looking forward to it. Like, we're going to be positive. But either or both of you just look at the thing that bugs me the most is the asylum process. People just come in here, they claim asylum, and that's the end of it. Like, I'm a real process person. Somebody must come in here, make an application, be put somewhere for 2-3 weeks. Somebody must process that and say, you are, you're not. That whole thing just seems to have died off. Either of you know how that works, or can you find out? It's just a big grey hole, and then people.
Well, you see, what happens is you go in and you make the application, and then they'll process it sometime down the road, months, years. And then you appeal it, and some NGO will fund your appeal. And then you appeal the appeal, and then you go into court and you appeal. And then eventually they say, oh, sure, you're here so long, you might as well stay. And you get humanitarian leave to remain. Yeah, and that's what's happened. Yeah.
The interesting thing... Yeah. The interesting thing is, after 4 months, you're now allowed work. So you're basically allowed to come here and get a working visa for nothing. And then once you have a job, and you, as you say, you grow ties to a community, or you're probably staying in an IPAS centre, and if you're outside an IPAS centre, like, they have buses going in and out of town, or their work will pick them up, or whatever. So they're allowed work. In some respects, people, that's a hot debate. They're like, well, it's probably better that they're working, that they're here. But if you create a situation where they're allowed work after 4 months, then more people are going to keep coming. So it's a pull factor. But then, if everyone was up there not working, we'd be like, well, why aren't they working?
Yeah, but the problem...
What if the ones that are coming from safe countries? Like, I get all that, Malachy, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, they should be straight out. I mean, if you're coming from a safe country, then there should be no application.
More than 90% of them.
Yeah, and they should be just thrown back at the border.
So I think it must be a case that there's no political. They don't want to.
They don't want to do it.
And so that's the real
But
issue.
what?
Because if they wanted to do it, they could stop it tomorrow.
Yeah.
This is the real question. Why is that? Why is there no political will? Actually,
Because these are all wedded to this globalised kind of world. And if you look at, I mean, I can't understand how the left, and if you go back to the creation of the trade union movement in Britain, the beginning of the last century, it was to stop imported labour. It wasn't the doctors and the scientists coming in, it was fellas coming in to work in low-paid jobs and drive down the price of labour. And that's exactly what's happening here. Because if you have somebody who can work here after 4 months, and they're living in an iPass centre where they're fed and watered, they can work for less than somebody who has to pay rent and somebody who has to pay all their own bills. And that, and the trade union movement in particular should be called out over this, because it's them, they're the biggest cheerleaders for importation of people. And it only, and then if you look on the other side, where you've, say, Google announced 2,000 jobs or whatever, they'll import 1,500 of them. So they're going to need somewhere to live, and that drives up rents because they're on high salaries. So that'll drive up the rents, and you'll have the likes of Google and all these other crowds buying apartment blocks for their workers. It's like Guinness building houses years ago for the workers, you know.
Company towns.
Legal aid, right? Do you think it's time that we diverted money away from criminal legal aid to civil legal aid? It's just that people, we seem to have spent, like, one criminal will make a barrister, God knows how much money in his lifetime, and there's people that require other legal services, and there's no way they're going to get legal aid for them.
Well, I mean, the whole legal aid system has to be reformed, particularly if you look at, let's say, just if you separate criminal and the family legal aid. If you take criminal legal aid, each appearance, you get 50 quid as solicitor or barrister. So solicitors who do that work need volume, right? Now, and then if somebody has a couple of charges, you can get a couple of certs for that. But if you look at the family side of it, where the fee is €340, €340 for a cert, right? Now those certs, the fee was reduced when the economy collapsed. It hasn't been increased since. And you could be in court now 5 or 6 times, particularly for access, and the state will still only pay 350 quid, and they charge the client 150 quid for the cert, right? But for a legal aid cert, there's no contribution in criminal. The courts will now generally order a Section 32 report in access cases, right? They cost on average $3,000, which the state will pay. If that assessor has to go to court, the daily rate is €875 for that person to go to court, to stand over their report. So when people talk about solicitors making a fortune out of it, there's no money in it, and most solicitors don't do it because, again, you need the volume and it doesn't pay. Like €340 for probably, in most cases, 3 or 4 half days, And that's, just don't always make as much money as people think.
Crime for a minute, but either of you like to see the government issue crime statistics broken down by immigration and asylum status?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they should, yeah.
The moment, of course, rely on anything.
Well, they won't, because they know what the answer is and they don't want to tell us. But anybody...
If you don't measure, you can't manage. They purposely don't measure.
Yeah. Now, if you go up to the CCJ or any district court in this country, you will see the impact of immigration on crime. So, I mean, it's very clear and it's blatantly obvious that there is an increase in crime because of migration.
The best example of what you're talking about there is actually if you go type in Danish statistics, just Danish government statistics, or Finland, Finnish government statistics, or Sweden, they have it all there in English. Like, never mind, and it's just the most perfectly presented sets of data. All done by nationality, where everyone came from, whether it's education, crime, health, and it's perfect. And it's like, why aren't we doing that? So many of our NGOs, if you read their literature, they're always quoting Denmark, Sweden. They always want the Danish or Swedish model. And I always, I just pray for the day where I'm up in a panel with one of them, because you'd lead them down this trap of like, oh, really? Yeah, interesting. And what's the Danish or Swedish approach to immigration? It's not the Danish a la carte menu. If you want to do that, it's the full Danish. And they are the easiest models that we could go and copy. And I think that's the way I think the government should be looking. It's like, what other country out there is similar size that we could try and learn from? And I think Denmark is a perfect example.
And just on the, where we were talking about legal aid, the other industry that's being created is the whole interpreters thing, and the amount of interpreters that are hanging around the courts and again, getting paid more than the solicitors.
That's something,
and if you can't speak English,
that's something
after 10 years, then,
yeah.
you shouldn't be in the country.
But there should be a simple upgrade for that. Like, you can speak into an app now,
Yeah.
and
Dublin man needs an interpreter.
Yeah. Dublin man wins the marathon.
Right, I think.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Just one more there. So just on bringing back to crime, like, do you think it's that there's a lack of like laws to actually criminalise things, or do you think it's just more that like?
Oh no, we've tons of laws. We're great. We're great with the laws.
Yeah.
It's the implementation that's the problem.
Willpower, and like a Minister for Justice with teeth that wants to go and do something, and you can clearly see that Helen McEntee has just been so weak, and you can make up excuses for her all you want, that maybe she's been railroaded by a department head or something like that. But if you're the minister, you're the minister, and it's complete willpower.
But it's policy.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't want to solve crime.
I think that's the kind of key thing. That's kind of what I was trying to get at with my question. If they don't want to solve it, I think, how are we going to actually, make progress? I mean, is this coming from Europe? Is that where the direction is coming from?
Well, it's actually.
I suppose they're too stupid to have come up with it themselves. But
the fund. If you go through the funding of the NGOs, it's you go down a rabbit hole pretty quickly of open society and things like that. And they advocate for social justice, and that's where it traces back from. And the Irish Penal. I love talking about the Irish Penal Reform Trust, because it's a brilliant case study of, in 2009 they got a lot of funding from Chuck Feeney, who's a famous Irish billionaire who gave it all away. And he set up this charity, and he actually lost control of his billions that he had, because someone from the Soros Foundation came onto his board and usurped him from the inside. He launched a coup, and it's a fascinating story. And it's like, and Chuck Feeney warned people. He was like, my thing has been taken over by social justice causes that I don't agree with. And you're reading this, and then you're reading that the Irish Penal Reform Trust are the number one body group that campaigned against Thornton Hall. And you're like, oh, suddenly you're that meme of putting it all together. But maybe that's a bit simplistic, but
you were talking earlier about the sort of society we live in, and holding adults, the parents responsible for the children. There's a huge amount of young kids now not finishing school, and like Malachy said, they're going out and they're selling drugs. I mean, there is a law there that prevents that. There's a system there in place that prevents that, and it doesn't seem to be implemented. But also, there's a huge amount of shoplifting.
yeah.
And like, shops are closing. You're going to go down Henry Street, it's kicked.
Yeah.
But they're closing, and they're closing a lot of them for that reason.
Yeah.
And like, I was listening to the radio the other day, and some fellow said they come in and he watches them shoplifting. He has them on CCTV. He calls the guards. They can't do anything about it. They can't use the CCTV. So I think, like, that's, if you think about it, if these kids are growing up and thinking that that's all right, and their parents are thinking that that's all right, like, society's just going to get worse and worse. And apart from the problems we have with immigration, we need to start looking at, like, the families and what's happening with the kids.
Yeah.
Kids are being encouraged.
But do you think that, if a
kid, poverty now, so
no. But if you think a 15-year-old goes into a shop and steals some, that they should be punished kind of severely to deter them, you know,
I think they should be locked up somewhere. No, I'm
Yeah.
not saying they should be in Mountjoy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I disagree with what happened in Letterfrack and all of those institutions. But it can't be right that a 15-year-old thinks they can go in and just lift up whatever designer stuff they want. And I mean, it's just not right that any 15-year-old thinks that this is a good life.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how do we encourage these children to get to a certain age and to work and think something of themselves, and perhaps get out of that rat trap that their parents were in? Because we were talking earlier about the North Inner City, and I remember the North Inner City when it was a kip to live in. But it's not kip to live in now. It's a good place. There's good housing. You know, there's a lot of things in place. But the children are being destroyed before they grow to adulthood.
Yeah.
But I think part of the whole policy, and just coming back to what you were saying there, is the destruction of the family.
Oh, well, there's no doubt about
And they want absent fathers. They don't want particularly male role models for any of these kids growing up. So a kid living with his mother probably doesn't encounter any strong male role models. The father is not there a lot of the time. There's no teachers that are male. There's no authority figures who are male. So there's no restrictions, and there's no somebody to look up to. You know, hopefully they look up to people like us who are, you know, actually trying. But the family, the nuclear family, is what they want to destroy, because that's society is at its best, it's at its safest, and it's at its most at its best time when you have a society based on families. Mother, father, children who live in a community where with other people who are in the same boat. And that's always been the way that we've done it for generations. And you know, when we were supposedly poor and stupid in this country, we were able to do all the infrastructure projects. We were able to build Finglas, Ballymun, estates right around the country. We were able to set up the ESB. We were able to set up the gas company. We were able to, we had a better train network in this country 150 years ago than we do today. You know, now to come from, if you want to go to Derry from Cork by train, you have to come to Dublin. You get a train from Dublin to Belfast. You have to get a train from Belfast to Derry, and then you have to get a bus. Like, years ago, you could just get a train up the west coast, you know. And now we've turned the old railway lines into cycle paths and greenways. Instead of saying, look, there's a train track there already, sort it out, put a train on, you know. And they talk about, you know, reducing your carbon footprint. You know, it doesn't seem to matter when you have to go from Cork on that huge circuitous route to get to Donegal. You know, it doesn't seem to matter when, you know, people, like I have a grandson, had to move to Newry last week and works in Dublin. And he'll have to drive down every day, you know, because there's no other way of getting there.
Can't drive, gets the lift.
So the trains, if he was to get a train, he'd nearly have to leave at 4 o'clock in the morning.
You know, there needs to be a punishment, but there also needs to be the supports. And, you know, the supports are discipline, whether it's the GAA club, whether it's a boxing club, or whether, you know, the new trend is SBG, martial arts. You know, and there's big buy-in from, you know...
Nobody should think it's right to go and commit any crime, and it doesn't matter because I get away with it. No, that's wrong. And then before they realise when they're 20, they're in fucking Mountjoy. You know, and that's it.
But that's where I agree with some of the arguments on the left, because the minute someone gets sent to Mountjoy as a kid, that's the end. So I, you know, this is the thing. We can like, some of those arguments are right, but you need they won't.
It can't be all punishment.
It can't be all punishment.
I agree, and that's what I'm saying. Wherever the kids are getting their
pathway for people out.
Yes.
Especially the young, because if you don't get them at 14 or 15, forget it. It's over.
Yeah, so that's why juvenile, you know, like better juvenile systems.
We're talking earlier about all the money that's gone into the North Inner City. Right, and in the North Inner City, massive amounts of money went in when there was the few at that time. In order to, you know, create little clubs or whatever to try and keep the kids occupied and keep them away from all of that. Which personally I think that's kind of a nonsense, you know, you're giving it to people who I'm not sure are in it.
Well, all of the money gets used up in not actually delivering a project, but actually in administering the running of a project. And, you know, if you look at how the state responds, and I touched on Veronica Gearden there earlier, but they brought in CAB, which just basically says, well, we reckon you made 10 million in the past year or two. Give us 3 or 4 and carry on. And that's, so they've just cleaned the rest of it. You've settled your thing. So the astute drug dealer should actually go and put in a return every October and say, I made, because then he wouldn't be hit with the penalties. You know, just say, I made 10 million last year, here's whatever tax is on that.
You touched on the corporate punishments in the sense of, I would agree going back to it, but at the same time, once they took that away, you have kids that turn around and says, you touch me, I'm going to sue you. So all of a sudden, the control has gone to the child, and there's no, where you say, teacher or parent or whatever. The child is in control instead of actually having a figure there of authority.
Yeah, but the guards can't chase someone on a scooter. You know, and that, like...
That's what I'm saying, that's the whole breakdown.
Yeah.
Going down
But
the child.
Well, the justification that they gave us for not chasing people on scooters was, well, if they crash and they get killed, you'll be down protesting at the police station about us.
Yeah.
So, and it's not worth it for a bag of crack. That's what they actually said. I think you were there for that meeting. Right, so we're going to wrap it up now.
Thanks very much.
Round of applause for the guys, please.
Very good.